Dunagoil, the hill of the Gaels. 1,000 years ago, the Vikings hauled their longships over the sand, over the shingle, onto this shore, the shore of Dunagoil, the hill of the Gaels. And why did they come? They wanted water, they wanted sheep and cattle, they wanted the women, they wanted the men, either dead or as slaves. Islanders were known as Brandanes, men of Bute, a green, warm and fertile island. They lived by fishing and by crofting, sheep and cattle. Some lived in caves near the sea. Or in stone huts nesting close to the land, out of sight of the sea and sheltered from the cold north winds. An even earlier generation had built standing stone circles and burial mounds long before Christianity. On the hill of the Gaels they built a wall, and then they built fire so fierce that it melted and fused the rock. A solid wall of rock against invaders, the largest vitrified fort in Europe, Dunagoil. The story goes back at least 4,000 years. They left traces in the soil of the caves, animal bones, sheep, deer, small ornaments, implements and weapons, some carved from bone and some made from bronze. This hill is called the Plan. On the left, on the loch in Glen Callum, was an island, a floating island of reeds. On other lochs, crannogs, fortified causeway islands. A mile inland was another enclosure, a causeway, a wall enclosing a settlement, a dark rocky valley. Trees, a well and stone huts where crofters had always lived. They shared this place with their animals. They left stone implements and Celtic grave markers. Some of the massive walls date from a time long before Christianity. The first Christians had reached the island by the 5th century, and St. Ninian had built a tiny church. St. Brendan left traces and died in 573, so Christianity was here long before it reached Iona. A bishop called Catton settled 3 miles away across the island, now a village we call Kilcatton. His sister Eartha had a son. Blane was his name, but he was illegitimate. It's said that his father was Aidan, king of ancient Dalriada. His mother blamed a spirit from a local fountain. The law was strict. He and his mother were cast adrift in a currach, a tiny boat covered with animal skin. They were cast ashore an island, where the young Blane stayed until he became 7. He came back to the island, as all Brandanes come back. He came under the wing of his uncle, Bishop Catton, and he continued his education. He grew spiritually, and finally he travelled to Rome to be appointed a bishop like his uncle. Returning from Rome, he founded his own monastery in this dark and mysterious place, inside the ancient fortified causeway. 575 AD. Holy soil from Rome was being carried through Glen Callum past the loch. Blane spilled some holy Roman soil. He asked a fisherwoman to help him. She refused, as well as a curse that she'd always find the sea at high tide whenever she went to gather shellfish. Bishop Blane banned all women from being buried in the holy soil. They stayed outside, in unconsecrated soil, outside the walls, and that was the law until 1661, and the islanders never again had a taste for shellfish. Bishop Blane became a man of stature in Scotland. He founded a cathedral at Dunblane, a kirk in Dumfries, and another at Kilblane. When he died around 590 AD, he was buried here, in the church of St. Blane. This 900-year-old Norman church stands over the site of St. Blane's monastery, and it was probably built by Alan the Steward, or Stuart, the only parish church on the island. 200 years ago, the new church was feeling its age. It was 700 years old. The old church became disused, but families still came to bury their dead. This well was the home of Sith, a spirit who cured sterility when given gifts of gold or of silver. This attracted the boys by hanging upside down into the water to relieve the fairy of her burden in silver or copper. The Vikings who stayed melted into the community. One is buried right here. The ruin has a fine Romanesque arch and many gravestones and markers for abbots, monks and commoners, all male. The walls included the rubble-built basilica of St. Blane, and then the roof came down, and St. Blane's church could have quietly passed into memory. Brandanes come back, drawn by common ancestry, an affinity with the soil and the sea and the rocks, with this church and this history. Meet pilgrims from Canada, America, New Zealand, Australia, all coming home. McCurdy, they were carriers, transport contractors for 200 years. Jameson from the farm of Amismore, grandmother's name McPhee, Jeanie Jameson McPhee, her daughter Rosina McCurdy Mackay, and then her namesake Rosina McCurdy, born in 1809, Mackay. This Mackay isn't connected to the Clan Mackay of Strathneva. Their graves are all over this churchyard. Sailmakers, fishermen, farmers, labourers, maybe saints, abbots or monks. They lived at Garchty, the farm down there in the hollow. Their name came from Macaw, which grew from Mackyle, and up at Kilmichael, close to the chapel remains, is a tumulus with a stone table marking the grave of Michael. He died on the 11th of April 490, 100 years before Blane. St. Michael, was a pupil of St. Patrick and a bishop in his own right, a priest of an even older generation. St. Ninian and his chapel remains at St. Ninian's Point, St. Brendan, Bishop of the Western Isles, St. Brooke, St. Bride, St. Michael, an island of saints. The chapel of St. Blane, the most complete, fascinating, mysterious, bewitched and peaceful place on a tranquil island. Bute.